Hi, everyone. I'm Cindy Hall with the Iowa Agriculture Literacy Foundation. It's so excited to have everyone here today. It's been so fun to watch everybody's presentations. Has anyone ever made a glitter jar? My kids love doing these. So I have one here. My daughter brought it. She actually brought it home from grandma's house. I don't allow glitter in my house. But it was orange and she was just mesmerized by it. And it's actually fun to watch. This one is all the same size glitter, but it's neat to do it with different sizes of glitter. Do you think the big or the small glitter falls to the bottom first? Go ahead and type your thoughts in the comments. Do you think the big glitter or the small glitter falls to the bottom first? If you are thinking big glitter, you're right. So the big pieces of glitter are the heaviest and they will go to the bottom first. And then medium-sized glitter. And then if they're smaller, that will float all around the top the longest, but eventually settle to the bottom. When my daughter plays with this, it usually takes half hour to an hour for all the glitter to settle to one layer, especially with the smaller particle sizes. Well, as I was watching her play with this, it made me realize there's a good analogy between this and soil. One of my favorite hands-on soil experiments to do is make a soil jar. And a soil jar is very much like a glitter jar. So we're going to make one. All you need is a few things to do this experiment. A jar, it could be a plastic jar, a glass jar, anything will work. I have a glass canning jar here, a 1-quart glass canning jar. Then you're going to need some good soil. Any type of soil will work. In fact, it's fun to do it with different types of soil. So you could get some soil from your house and maybe some soil from your grandparents' house, maybe a farmer's field that you know of. And it's neat to see what happens differently with the different soil types. So this is from my yard, a plate of soil. I always like to spread it out on a plate first and give it some time and kind of pick it with your fingers and make sure there's not any earthworms in there. If you were on for the session earlier with Deanna Anderson, you'll see that she loves earthworms and I love earthworms after watching her get excited about earthworms. But we wouldn't want to put any earthworms into the soil jar. So it's kind of let the around the soil, just make sure there's not any of our worm friends in there because they would not do well in a jar of water. So you're going to take the soil and dump it in to the jar. I like doing it on a paper plate so that it's easy to get into the jar. Okay, so I have, actually I got a ruler here. When it's not packed down, I have about 2.5 inches of soil in my jar today. So next I'm going to take some water and I'm going to fill up the jar. Now there's one other step that you can take. You can get a white powder called alum in the herb. It's usually in the spice section of the grocery store. If you add a little bit of that to the mixture, it will settle faster. I didn't do it today because you may not have that in your house and it works fine just as is. But if you want to do this in a classroom, if you want to show your teacher, you want to do this with your teacher, it's best to put a little alum in there because that will make the soil particles settle faster. So now we have our jar and we're going to give it a really good shake. And now we have a soil milkshake. It looks all dark and cloudy. But if we set it to the side, we set it down and wait a little bit, it's going to settle in layers. The soil is made up of 3 main soil particles: sand, silt, and clay. Which one do you think is the biggest particle? Sand is the biggest. And if you've ever played at the beach, you look at the little tiny grains of sand and they look really, really small, but they're actually big in comparison to the other types of soil particles. So sand are the largest particles in soil. So they're going to be the first to settle. So if I take my jar and look now, it's still pretty cloudy. But if I would wait a minute or two, and actually it's hard to see in this, but if I was to, you can already tell that there is a layer of soil settling at the bottom. That is going to be the sand particles. So after 1 minute, you want to measure again and see how much sand you have in there. So we're going to say about 1 inch of sand in the soil. And then you want to let it set about another 3 to 4 hours, 3 to 4 hours. Let it sit longer. And the next layer that's going to settle is the silt particles. They are medium in size, and they're going to be the next to settle. Finally, after you let it sit overnight or many hours, the final layer that's going to appear, and sometimes it takes a few days for it to all settle out, that's going to be the clay particles. And the clay particles are the smallest. So if I was to run water through a tub of soil with water, like a plastic pot with sand in it, and I was to run water through, it's going to run very quickly because the soil particles are big and the water is going to run through. It has space to go through. If I was to take one of all silt particles, put the water through it, it's going to go, but it's going to drain slower. If I was to repeat that again with just clay soil, heavy clay soil, the water is not going to go through very well. So farmers and gardeners, they like a soil that has a mixture of those components, sand, silt, and clay. So I did this one, this jar, about a week ago from my garden. And you can see it's pretty clear on top. It's hard for you to tell from the camera, and I tried a magnifying glass and you still can't see it very well. But if I'm to measure this, we have about, I can still see the different layers. I have about 2 inches an inch of sand, about an inch and a half of sand, an inch of silt, and then about a half inch of clay particles in here. And it's very distinct between the clay particles and the rest. You can really see that they're a much smaller particle size. And then there's other things here on top in the water too. It's hard to tell it here, but if I tilt the jar, you can see some floaty things, and that's organic matter in the soil. There might be parts of sticks. If you look at the bottom, you might see little rocks. They're going to be the first to fall to the ground. But it's a really neat experiment to do, and you have everything in your home in order to do it. You just need a jar with a lid, some soil from outside, and water. Shake it up and watch the different layers appear. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'll let the next presenter go.